Welcome to episode 239 of the Barcelona podcast, brought to you by the Blue Wire Podcast Network. I'm Dan Hilton, and I'm not joined by Francesc Tomas today, but our old friend and Rayo Vallecano expert, Robbie Dunne. Robbie, how's it going?
Hey, very good, Dan. Glad to be here.
And Robbie is joining me to talk today about Barca's win over Rayo Vallecano 2-1. In hindsight, happened yesterday, but the reason Robbie was the only man for the job is because you literally wrote the book on the team from Madrid. It's called Working Class Heroes, all about Rayo Vallecano by that same name. So if there's anybody to help us understand how Barcelona broke through Rayo Vallecano, it is Robbie Dunne. So we will talk about that team from Madrid at the end. I promise. Again, they are vanquished, and I know they're already a bit in the back burner, but if there's a team from Madrid to root for, they have a good argument for the team, for this to be the team that you pick, and Robbie has that argument. But we are going to start with the Barca side of things. And Robbie, I think the place to start is with none other than the Dutch midfielder, Frenkie de Jong. Francis and I discussed what changed on Monday with the formation change, but what about de Jong's game have you been most impressed by, or parts of it that you didn't see before? And I mean, besides just the 4 goals in the 7 matches, obviously.
Yeah, well, I guess it's not really about what he can't do, because he does everything at a fairly high level. I think what we've seen recently is Ronald Koeman has been asking him to do more of the things that where he can affect a team better, which and has kind of we spoke just before he came on about a tweet that I put up about his statistics and stuff. He's not pressing as high, which kind of like as we know, pressing is kind of high risk, high reward, but it doesn't work out all the time. So you're kind of seeing he's doing a little bit less of that, and we're seeing kind of more of him arriving into the box. We're seeing him more as a box-to-box midfielder. We're seeing like Sergio Busquets dropping in between the centre backs now, and it's almost turned into 3 at the back when they do that during the build-up. So and then Frenkie de Jong kind of drops into that Busquets position, and then as soon as they build up to a certain point, de Jong pushes forward where he's just as comfortable as well. So it's not so much the things he can't do. They're now asking him to do the things that he's way more comfortable doing, and that there's more of a payoff, I guess.
Yeah, and you could see that against Athletic Club in the Supercopa final. You know, it was de Jong who, by his fault or not, he had stepped, and that space that he vacated was what Iker Muniain was able to push the ball forward to, and it eventually leads to the Inaki Williams winning goal in extra time there. And again, it wasn't so much a fault of de Jong as much as it is that Barca aren't really stepping as a team, aren't really stepping as a press, and not only is that not really Koeman's style, but it would have been too quickly in this project to get that going. We even saw, now we're going back a few years to Liverpool when Klopp originally showed up. You could argue that it took about 2.5 seasons for Klopp's gegenpress vision that you saw him enact at Dortmund actually come to full fruition at Liverpool. It did take time, and to get a team to once again be pressing, one that honestly, because of Luis Suarez and Messi up top for the last, now we're talking 5 years, that press isn't the same one that Pep Guardiola was employing back in 2010, 2011. And I don't know if it ever will be, because football has changed and is now more prepared to deal with that kind of thing. And as Frances and I talk about plenty, it's not only the ball skills from center backs and goalkeepers to almost every team at every level now can break you down, even the Sunday teams. But for Frenkie de Jong to be not only much more judicious with when he presses, but by not pressing as much, he's giving Busquets much more time and much more of an outlet to be that other piece, where if de Jong or Pedri can't break down the midfield passing, as in the other team trying to come down the middle, Busquets is there, as opposed to Barca trying to press so high that now Busquets is cut off, 50, 60, 70 yards from his own goal, and he winds up getting blown by, as we've seen a bunch of times, whether it was for against Elche. But we're not talking about Busquets. We're talking so much more about de Jong. And statistically, in the graphic you shared, his final third tackles, if you will, so that means he's not really pressing. The numbers do back that up. And then his tackles in open play as well aren't really happening. And when they do, it's because he's shading over to the wings and he's helping the fullbacks with those, we'll say, defensive overloads. And that's where they're getting the turnovers here. As you talk about, it feels like something is missing now defensively, but the stats can back it up that it doesn't. And I think what it does do is it helps Barca to control games so much more. And the final point, as you mentioned, is those final third runs into the box I mean, we talked about it as Paulinho, we talked about it as Arturo Vidal, but do you think that run is absolutely required for a team like Barcelona, who at this moment are not playing a traditional number 9, or even taking that a step further? Do you think that is every modern team in modern football needs to have that run to be able to break down a team?
Well, I think just kind of breaking down what you said in terms of like the Liverpool took a couple of years for them to kind of get that press. The reason is as well is that firstly getting all those automatizations going and getting that understanding. Secondly, finding the right pieces that fit the puzzle, and that took Klopp a while to kind of, I don't mean weed out the wrong players, but kind of shape the squad into something where he could actually put his stamp on it. And it's the same with Koeman. Like, I mean, at the end of the day, and I think we've seen a slight, maybe, I don't know if it's a resurgence from Busquets, but Busquets has been a little bit better from what we thought he was going to be this season. But at the end of the day, this is a very fragile team, and we saw that against Real Madrid in the Clásico a couple of months ago. And we've seen it time and time again where they can be beaten on the counter. And even last night, I felt, while I always thought that they were going to beat Rayo, I thought that they were a little bit susceptible. And I mean, maybe Rayo, the shots didn't they couldn't kind of create those chances. But Rayo kind of went at them a little bit, and you felt like, compared to like years gone by when Barcelona were excellent in transition, you do feel like this Barcelona is a little bit more fragile. Going on to then about Frenkie de Jong arriving in the box, I think that, well, when you think about what they've lost in Luis Suarez, so you've got like him, a manipulator of space in the box, someone who's just so cute in the box and so savvy with his movement and his ability to shape his body. You've lost that, and we saw that again last night where Barcelona don't really have a number 9 per se, so they've got nobody in the box. And what they're relying on then is kind of through balls. They're relying on Messi to do something, and they're relying on maybe Pedri to kind of create an opening. So what you do need then is, when you do kind of attack down the wings, or if you do kind of get the ball into the final third, you do need that little bit of an element of surprise. So Frenkie de Jong, and we have to remember as well that he's only 23, so he's only kind of finding his feet. So say, for example, with the like when we talk about pressing, we think immediately of like of a player crashing into the defender, the player with the ball. Whereas in like, I suppose, tactical parlance, they say like the goal of pressing isn't the goal of the first press isn't necessarily to get a tackle. It's to just get the man turned. So maybe Frenkie de Jong is learning, I don't have to commit all the time here. That's probably why his tackles are down. Maybe Koeman's saying to him, relax, Frenkie, like kind of, because he is a very diligent player. We see that he kind of, there's no ego about him. Very diligent. He'll do what he's asked, and no nonsense out of him. So like, he's probably saying, just relax a little bit, like just turn the player around with your press first, and then let us kind of recover rather than diving in. And for a player 23, he's just starting to learn all these things. So he's adding little bits and pieces to his game and kind of finding the player he needs to be, because the player that he was at Ajax is a very different player to the one he's going to turn into at Barcelona. Okay, there's going to be fundamental things there that are going to remain the same. But Busquets plays in the position where he would ideally like to play, and so he has to kind of figure this out. And that's good for Barcelona going forward, and it's definitely good this year for him, given the fact that he is capable of doing those things. If he was a one-trick pony and he could only play in Busquets' position, Barcelona would have a problem. But he's shown now that he can be that kind of Arturo Vidal player. He's willing to learn, he's willing to adapt, and he's just a really complete player at the moment, and he's adding so much to Barcelona.
Right, it's a trade-off too, even statistically. Busquets and Araujo, since this recent emergence, or basically it was the formation change of a 4-3-3. Again, we're going to talk about the formation change in a bit in terms of Griezmann and Braithwaite and forward later. But when it comes to Busquets and Araujo, because they play on the right side, well, that being Busquets when De Jong is going to press, and then Araujo being the right center back, their interceptions since this formation change are up. So while De Jong's tackles are down, the interceptions for the two men behind him, as you mentioned, as they bypass, as the team tries to bypass that first press, the quality of passes getting past De Jong is not up to caliber, and that is why Busquets and Araujo are in those better positions. So yeah, as we continue to see the emergence of De Jong, as I keep saying, every match seems to be more and more of a, not only a bigger sample size, but reinforcing the idea that there's finally a formula that seems to work. And one of the things that we argued even 2 years ago when De Jong arrived, that if Frenkie de Jong and Messi and Ter Stegen are your three best players, you have a shot at La Liga. And unfortunately, it took Messi about a month and a half to get going. It took De Jong now, about 2 years to get going, or a year and 9 months to get going. But to the final point as well, we're going to move on to Riqui Puig now, because for De Jong, as you mentioned, he only really became a first-team professional when he was 21. So a quick reminder that he wasn't necessarily, I know he came from the Netherlands where teenagers break through all the time, and we were saying Gravenberch at the moment with Ajax, he's 18, but De Jong actually came over from Heerenveen, and he was only 18 when he came over, but he actually spent a year and a half, 2 years with young Ajax, and then he finally broke in as a center back at almost the age of 21. So De Jong, not say that he's a late bloomer when it comes to these teenage prodigies, because we always see these top elite players coming at 18 or 19, but De Jong, yes, you're right. He's only in his about third year of real professional football. Now, Riqui Puig, he's a player that is technically in his second season of real first-team professional football, if you will. He has been playing in the third division technically now for 2.5 years, and he is 21 going on 22. What I saw yesterday from Riqui Puig, Robbie, was, and I'm glad that we have you to talk as somebody who's outside the very polarizing debate from Culés, because both sides have kind of dug in, and you either support him or you have to find reasons not to support him. But for me yesterday, I saw a player that didn't necessarily pass the eye test. He was doing things that were good, he was doing things that were bad. But then statistically, the advanced metrics say that Puig actually had a tremendous first half with a key pass, chances created. He won 7 of his 11 duels, believe it or not, on the ground, 2 successful dribbles, even a successful tackle. So to me, Puig didn't look like he was finding the game yesterday, and yet the numbers say that he was one of Barca's more influential players in the first 45 minutes.
Yeah, and I'm not just saying this because the stats said I didn't actually know that, but I would have said the same. And it wasn't so much what he accomplished or what he achieved, but it was more kind of the intent and what he was kind of trying to do. And you can see he's the kind of player, and I guess we're kind of biased given the fact that he's so small and he still looks like a kid, but he is a player with loads of personality, I feel like. And we saw that last night, I thought, definitely in that Rayo, maybe they didn't target him per se, but they were definitely making sure to kind of let them know that they were in a game, and they were kind of breaking up play a little bit, a lot of tactical fouls a lot of the time, and Riqui Puig was a player who, given his trickiness, he was one of the players who was on the receiving end of a couple of those tackles, but he kept asking for the ball, he kept looking for it, and it was a strange game too, I guess, in that. Well, given the fact of what we see with De Jong and his position, and then there was times like when Riqui Puig, who's just as capable of kind of dropping deep and kind of looking for it from there, he did that a couple of times last night, and he was able to kind of find a little bit more space in those areas. But I'd say like, I mean, I thought he played quite well in his kind of personality and how much he showed for the ball and wanted it. But maybe if you're talking about going forward, you probably would like to see him a little bit closer to goal, but then it does get quite congested up there with Messi, and you're trying to kind of break down a low block and things like that. So yeah, like based on what I saw last night, I was very impressed. But yeah, you would like to see a little bit more from him, and you do wonder where he does fit into the side.
Yeah, well, let's continue to talk about Puig. I almost did a lens of Junior Firpo here on the other side of the break. And Robbie, I think one of the things that didn't help Puig too much yesterday was the fact that his left back in that situation was Junior Firpo. And we saw that, I was watching on the ESPN feed, and you could hear in the United States, and you could see he knew that this was his shot, and he knew that he didn't seize that opportunity, that being Junior Firpo, and his positioning was off. And as I said, he was not really supporting Puig in the same way that even Mingueza was supporting De Jong on the other side as the other, interior / fullback situation. And without Junior Firpo being in those right spots, it was maybe something more than confidence, right? So, Robbie, not just speaking of confidence, because clearly it's lacking for Junior Firpo. He's never really had that string of games since he came over from Real Betis now a year and a half ago. So, For Junior Firpo, what did you see that, I guess even from a tactical perspective, that he wasn't doing right and that just seems to be lacking?
Yeah, I mean, you summed it up there. I mean, his positioning was slightly off, and he wasn't arriving at the right times, down the left wing. And I mean, I know we want to, and it really is probably a tactical issue, and him being unable to kind of assimilate into the team and know exactly what a team wants in different at different times. And I mean, when you look at kind of elite level football, and I think we're going to touch on this later on, a lot of it is decision making and knowing when. I mean, in your head, or you've been given the game plan and what you have to do. It's knowing when to do that and when not to do that. And what we've seen with Junior and it just seems like at this level he seems incapable of doing that based off a myriad factors. So one of them definitely is confidence, and they showed a clip of him after the when he was taken off and he was in the stand, and he kind of got sighed a big, and he just you could see he was really, really frustrated. As you said, he knew it was his chance. Yeah, kind of similar maybe to the kind of Luka Modric situation, Real Madrid, where Odegaard came in, and then they want desperately for Odegaard to be the guy. Didn't really do it, and then they had to lean back on Modric, and Modric took that chance. Same with Jordi Alba. Not saying Junior Firpo is going to supplant him in the squad, because Alba probably has another maybe season or two in him, but Barcelona want Firpo to be the guy, and he just can't seem to grab that opportunity. And it's been going on too long now, and all those memories, all those scars, all those failed opportunities are haunting him. Like, and I mean, you can kind of see that from the way he's playing. He's a little bit hesitant, as you say, getting forward, incapable of kind of assimilating into the game plan and understanding what's needed from him. And I mean, I know we try our best to kind of separate tactical from mental and physical and things like that, but they all do play a part. And I think Junior Firpo he's kind of stuck at the moment in that in his own head, I would say.
Yeah, and speaking of a player that was in his own head and seems to be out of his own head at the moment, is Antoine Griezmann. And he seems like, at least on the box score, that he was absent in the last 3 matches. But what he's doing off ball, that being Antoine Griezmann in that 4-3-3, it has since pushed Braithwaite to the bench here. So Barca's formation story this season, 4-2-3-1 is how it started. It looked ugly. Barca had some bad results early on. Then they moved to the 4-2-3-1 with Braithwaite as the reference point for Griezmann. That also coincided with a bit of Messi's injury and a little bit of a layoff there for him. But Braithwaite winds up becoming that center forward and almost undroppable for a few matches there in the middle. Then Koeman switches to the 4-3-3. That pushes Braithwaite back to the bench. And I think now this formation, and again, I'm leading you and you don't necessarily have to agree with me, but it's now Antoine Griezmann. He is the starter in that 4-3-3, and Braithwaite is on the bench, right? We're set in that formation, and it's Griezmann's job now to be that point of reference. Not as a center, I'd say not a striker, because you would never call him a striker, but as that center forward who's either dropping into the space that Messi isn't vacating, going out to the wing when he has to, and just kind of putting himself always in the right spaces to allow Frenkie de Jong to make those runs in the box, to allow Messi to get off good shots, to allow Pedri to get in and around the box, and to allow Jordi Alba space on the left. Basically, getting out of everybody's way, but being a nuisance for the opposition. I'd say that's almost his positioning, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. And we saw that. I don't know if it was tactical or Koeman kind of instructed this, but he did go more centrally then when Barcelona were looking to get the equaliser, and he was kind of trying to kind of maybe kind of stretch out Rayo's defence a little bit. But yeah, I mean, and that's kind of one of it's both a compliment and a little bit of a kind of drawback to Antoine Griezmann, and we've seen it time and time again, and the criticism he's taken. In many ways, Antoine Griezmann is just too normal of a guy. I mean, you look at the likes of, say, a Lionel Messi or Cristiano Ronaldo or guys like this, and they are just so single-minded and they are so ruthless in their pursuit of perfection, their pursuit of glory, and obviously they both drove each other on to that level. But like Griezmann just is. I'm not saying, and I'm not saying he's just happy being a guy, but in many ways he kind of flourishes in that role, and that's probably maybe why he was so good at Atletico because he wasn't kind of that star, and while he both was and he wasn't in that he was the main player, obviously, but he was just another cog in a very very functional wheel, and I think. Like I mean, we've seen it there. For example, I just can't understand the situation with the penalties. Like Griezmann, didn't take the penalty against oh, I can't remember who it was against now, and I was Brett White missed it. I can't remember who they played, but I just couldn't understand why Griezmann didn't take it. Then he steps up to take a penalty against Bilbao in the Copa, and he looks so incredibly nervous, and it's just this kind of distilled. This is kind of his. He does not like being the one in the spotlight, or maybe he was in his own head at that time. But maybe last night we saw Messi coming back, and Griezmann was just happy, like, oh, thank God, it's someone else to kind of shoulder the load here because I'm not comfortable. I'm more of a facilitator, and I will score you 10, 12, 15 goals a season, but I don't like being the guy. Not so much a spotlight kind of a thing, but more attracting attention from the opposite defense. You, Messi, you kind of create all the openings, and I'll sneak in and I'll finish perfectly fine. But it's just kind of how he sees himself in the team, and obviously then we have the kind of added problem, not problem, but him kind of maybe feeling a bit. And obviously Messi come out, and I think him and Messi are obviously fine now, but like him kind of feeling, where do I fit in this? Like I mean, like I was saying with Junior Firpo, all that talk of Griezmann, like where do you fit? That kind of stuff doesn't go away. So all the time, Griezmann's going out thinking, where do I fit in this whole scheme of things? And but I think slowly but surely he has gotten an understanding of Messi. Pedri has kind of and Frenkie de Jong have kind of lightened the load a little bit for Griezmann, and then we've seen him flourish a little bit more in those situations.
Yeah, and it's interesting to me with Griezmann that we've talked about this now for years, that his on-field personality and his off-field personality are different, because if you know that his off-field personality, or the persona that we understand him to be, meaning, and I know he usually does them for his daughter, but his goal celebration seems to be, we'll say, the most fun, or they seem to have the most personality to them. And then you see him with the documentary drama and all that stuff, and it seems like he is this larger than life, I need to be a superstar attention getter off the pitch. But then you look on the pitch and you're absolutely right in terms of, I think, what the media almost concocted based on his off-field personality for Atletico Madrid, that for a team like that, Diego Simeone's side, they needed to have the guy. You can't have a major team if you're going to talk about it. And whenever we cover Napoli, for it seems like Barca are always facing Napoli in the Champions League, there has to be a guy. But every time I look at that Napoli side, whether it was Dries Mertens or Fabian Ruiz, they don't really have that central figure. They merely are a team with a bunch of very, very good players in the same way that Atletico Madrid is. So when you're previewing Napoli, you're saying, oh, it's Messi's going to be is a talisman for Barcelona in the way that Dries Mertens is for Napoli, but that's not entirely true because of the way that load is shared. And Griezmann was the same way at Atletico Madrid, where Griezmann was not the talisman of that squad. He may have been the best, quote-unquote, best player in that team, but it was a media narrative that he had to be the superstar for that side. When you just look up and down their lineup, when they weren't winning the Liga the last 3 years, Koke, Saul, it would be whatever the flavor of the month was. And even last season, when Griezmann was already with Barcelona, Marcus Llorente winds up breaking on the scene, being the guy for 5 or 6 matches. And now this season they do have Luis Suarez, but we've talked about that before. We're going to instead go back to Barcelona and talk about Luis Suarez's BFF, his best friend Messi. 7 goals and 2 assists in his last 6 games, that being Messi. I'm not sure if people have realized, Robbie, that Messi's clicking again. 7 goals and 2 assists in 6 games. Seems like Messi, even though he was suspended for 2 games last week, seems like he's, we'll say, back as if he ever left.
Yeah, I don't really. I mean, it's a kind of a difficult one to say. To kind of, I mean, the hangover from the summer obviously lasted for a couple of months, and he even did an interview then shortly after, and he was like, "Look, I want to put this to bed, and I want to kind of just come out and speak about this more for his own sake, I think, than the public's sake, because he knew he was suffering." I just wonder, like, I mean, so you talk about like kind of, and it's something that Real Madrid are struggling with as well at the moment, in that And again, I think we might touch on this later on when you're talking about kind of developing players and stuff like that. So you've got like this win now model all the time. Barcelona and as we saw with their finances, they have kind of mortgaged their future and have to win now all the time. And this is the kind of seed of the super champions or the European Super League. They have to win all the time. There is no room anymore for La Masia or for Real Madrid to develop these young players, because you can't. There's so much media attention. There's so much riding on every single game now that you can't. And they've come to dominate so. They've become so incredibly dominant that you can't even lose one game anymore. So the likes of Junior Firpo, and I know that would have happened 10, 20 years ago with a guy just not settling, but they would have been given a chance. Right now, given the kind of state of the media in terms of Twitter and things like that, and it feels like where everything has to be in fast forward. So but Messi, I feel like is looking at this going, this team needs a new era has to begin. How likely am I to win titles in my last couple of years with this team? And I understand that Pedri has looked absolutely amazing. Frenkie de Jong is kind of coming into his own. There's loads of like Ter Stegen is obviously world class. You've got a good kind of backbone. But is it enough for Messi to be and remain competitive for the last 2 or 3 years of his career? That tension is there all the time. And I know Messi isn't the kind of most expressive player on the pitch at any time. But I feel like now that probably is eating away at him. So, I mean, I understand in the last few weeks he looked fine, but we're only kind of 2 matches removed from him kicking out at or hitting out at the Athletic Bilbao player. That tension is always going to be there for the next 6 months. So while you can say he's back, I mean, Lionel Messi at 80% or 70% is still absolutely world class, game changing, game deciding. But it's just when we get into the kind of nitty gritty of, say, an Anfield or Roma or games of that nature, is Messi going to be there and present and able to kind of change the game for them? I don't know. And that's what we can talk all day and night about the Copa del Rey last 16 game against Rayo Vallecano and the Super Cup against Athletic Bilbao. But at the end of the day, their season is going to be defined by those games in the Champions League against the Bayern Munich or against the PSG. You know?
Yeah.
Is Messi, is he going to be able to be there for them at that time? And I'm not doubting his professionalism or anything like that. I'm just wondering, will that tension overcome his desire to be the guy for Barcelona?
Yeah. You know, Robbie, I actually have in my podcast studio, you know how in a factory, there's that sign that says how many days since the last accident? And, you know, they always say in the cartoon shows or the TV shows, it always goes back to 0. Well, I have one here that says days since we last said Anfield or Roma, and now unfortunately I got to take it back down to 0 because we brought it up on Monday too. So yeah, I mean, those are the things, the nightmares that haunt Barcelona constantly and consistently. And you did mention about the chances that youth have gotten, and so I want to ask you, from an outsider, for Trincao, I thought he was better against Elche, and I thought he was, again, fine, as we saw getting the start against Rayo Vallecano as well. And I think with him, he's the one young player other than Pedri, who's earned his minutes. Trincao's the one young player for Barca this season, unlike, I guess, Araujo and Mingueza have been thrown in there too, and Dest as well, I guess. Now I'm talking myself out of it, but Trincao has not really been as good as the others. And yet, as a youngster, unlike Alex Callado or Under Oriana or any of the other academy products around the same age, Trincao didn't come from the academy, and he seemingly is getting chance after chance after chance to deliver. And in the last few matches, I know that you don't watch Barca, I mean, per minute and per touch like a Kool-Aid might, like we do here on the pod, but am I just wanting to see progress, or do you think there's actual progress that he's made from what you might have seen in October to what you saw yesterday?
Yeah, I thought he was good last night, definitely. In terms of, again, like kind of, he's very elusive and he's very tricky, and he kind of skipped by a couple of tackles and offers width there when you don't have the Dest there. Like I know Mingueza isn't kind of the same kind of a fullback as Dest is, but like he definitely offers wit, and then you're obviously kind of not so much comparing him to his past self. You're kind of comparing him to like an Ousmane Dembele, and he doesn't have that kind of those lightning that kind of changes pace, or he doesn't have that ability to kind of just streak clear. But in terms of his elusiveness, and he's probably just missing that final product. And like I said again, with the likes of Junior Firpo and all that, that's what can make or break you at Barcelona. And I suppose the other thing is he's been scrutinised. Given the fact that he's not from Barcelona, and like he's kind of an outsider coming into the Camp Nou, and kind of will he fit with the Barca way and the Barca model? How quick will he learn it? But also he kind of snuck in under the radar also, in that he just kind of was signed and mentioned as a kind of like there wasn't all that much. Maybe in Kool-Aid universe there was a lot of hype, but I feel like there wasn't as much hype, and therefore he hasn't been maybe criticized as much, given the fact that hype wasn't there. So he's kind of been evaluated based off the lack of hype. So he looks good. He's a young player again, elusive, lacking that final product. But again, that's going to happen, and you have to kind of, if Barcelona want to remain the club that they claim that they still are and want to be, they have to put their trust in these young guys and hope that they both will come good, and that they will be put into an environment and will be trusted and will be given the confidence to come good.
Yeah, you're right about that hype. I mean, Kool-Aid's, most of them don't really watch the Portuguese league. And it's also, as we know, whether it's the Luis Figo effect all these years later, or it's just the Spain versus Portugal rivalry, that Portuguese players get a shorter leash a lot of the time. But as you mentioned, Trincao winds up coming almost in the cover of night as a Jorge Mendes client for maybe a bit of money, but that was what the market for him was over the summer. And that happens all again in the shadow of what was going on with Messi. So all of our attention was in that direction. And as you mentioned too, Trincao, he doesn't have the same quick switch, if you will, of Dembele. But for Braga and in the Portuguese league, one of the things that made his price tag what it was, that he was scoring goals, and his final product was actually a big part of his game. And so if Trincao isn't scoring goals, which he has yet to record a goal for Barcelona, you kind of lose 30 to 40% of what he was bought for if he's not actually putting the ball in the back of the net, because his path to get the goal isn't really going to wow you in a way that Ansu Fati or Dembele does. Now, we have two more things to talk about here. A quick thing about and it shouldn't really be quick, but Robbie, I'm not putting the pressure on you to talk about Barca's financial situation and all that bad news. That's something else entirely, and then we'll end with Rayo Vallecano. So before we do talk about Rayo, I want to ask you a question here. If you were a Barca presidential candidate, how would you handle the Eric Garcia situation? I guess even from a politics perspective, on the back of the financial news that came out this week.
Yeah, I mean, depending what the asking price is, I guess. I mean, he has said that he's willing to kind of, or Victor Font has said that he's willing to forego his wages, and yeah, like the thing about it is, being a presidential candidate, you have to kind of, it's like, I mean, any kind of politics, you have to kind of find out what the people wanting, or and give it to them. And in terms of, even if he becomes a massive failure, fans love new shiny things. So I mean, if you wanted to kind of get some extra bonus points, you could definitely you'd probably go for him. I mean, I don't know what City's situation is in terms of how much they're willing to let him go for. Like, it's not, I don't think it's massive amounts or anything like that. And it would be a massive kind of a brownie point for you by promising a new player, bringing him in. But given the fact that the coronavirus situation, would it be a wise thing to do, given the kind of all the noise at the moment about Barcelona's finances? Would it be seen as kind of negligent almost, or not negligent? Would it be seen as irresponsible? Not even a difficult word. Would it be seen as irresponsible? I'm not entirely sure. I mean, is he a player that is going to add to the team straight away? I would imagine so. Yeah, like, I mean, I'm not entirely sure how to. People love new shiny signings, and I think that would be a kind of a quick win for a presidential candidate. But at the same time, you have to weigh up: would it be the right way to start your presidential reign?
Yeah, I mean, I think for better or worse, and this could just be the internet, this could just be our closed Facebook group, but it seems to me that he's always, and now it seems like he's going to be, if he doesn't come for free in the summer, and Barca push, I think the number I saw last was 3 million euros to Man City. So yeah, not an insane amount, but also an insane amount when Barca have negative 90 million euros to be able to spend when they owe 196 million euros still for other transfers, 49 of which were Coutinho, which we obviously, again, it's not Eric Garcia's fault that Coutinho didn't work out 2.5, 3 years ago, but on the backdrop of what Barca's financial situation is, having a player who could come for free, not come for free, seems to be the argument, but it has nothing to do with Garcia. So my fear is that Culés will look at Garcia as, hey, this kid, I mean, Barca are in this dire financial situation, and yet they needed to get this kid. So he better be good. He better be good on his word. So my fear is that Eric Garcia, even though he's a former academy product, even though it's a homecoming of sorts, even though that for Man City he has been good, but unable to break into being one of their regular two starters, but he still is also just turned 20. So he's a young player that is kind of going to have to fight for his opportunity at Barcelona as well. And I'm just a little nervous that he's another one of those cases that, as much of it would be a heartwarming homecoming if he winds up being a future star, that he just won't have the leash because of what he represents in terms of Barca's finances. Now, I think we put a pin in Barcelona. Unfortunately, we've ended it on a sour note. But a positive note for Rayo Vallecano, yes, they lost that match, but they're a team that I want you to speak about here a little bit now. Messi has scored in 10 of the 11 games he's played against Rayo and has never lost against the Madrid side. So, Robbie, I'm thinking that I know there's sympathy when there's no reason to pick non-Barca favorites, but I will ask you, for all the Spanish teams that you've gotten familiar with, what makes Rayo Vallecano so special?
Well, firstly, the fact that I wrote the book about them, and I kind of had to get close to them, and I had to get intimate with the surroundings and the stadium, and I interviewed a lot of the people around the club, and I learned firsthand in a formal setting what it means to people. I interviewed fans, I went on away trips, I spoke to the Bucaneros, the ultra fan group, and also just my own personal kind of the way that I see football and the way that I think football should be and the way that I think fans should be, and that's partly the reason why. And then there's also a personal thing in that, like, I grew up in Ireland. We had no football club close to us. We played a different sport called Gaelic football, and that was my true passion growing up. And I had friends who supported Man United, and my brother absolutely loved Liverpool, and I couldn't understand why, and I could never get a connection. We went to London when I was younger, and we went to White Hart Lane to see Spurs play, and I kind of watched Spurs then, and I kind of had an affinity for them, but I never felt a connection to a club because I wasn't in the middle of it. I didn't go to games regularly. I had no skin in the game, we'll say. Like, whereas with Rayo, it's the first club where I'm friends with fans of the club, and we go and we meet before the game, and it was the first kind of emotional connection that I had. And then you see like stories coming out about like the current owner, Raúl Martín Presa, and the way that it's run, and you see the shambles that it is, and you feel something, and that kind of gives you an incentive then to kind of watch them a little bit closer, and then you get even more involved and things like that. So yeah, like, I mean, just the fact that I wrote the book and the fact that their brand of football fandom is something that I completely identify with, and then just kind of it mixes in with my own love story with Spain and coming here and moving here, and I've got lots of fond memories. So there's plenty there to kind of pick through, but I just love them, and I think that they're a great club.
Well, that's what I was going to ask too. Areola, it was a little confusing that obviously a new manager has to start somewhere. So he winds up being a long-time Athletic Club right back, now takes over Rayo Vallecano. And what was puzzling to me against Barcelona, and you can kind of speak to Rayo's season this year in the Segunda Division A, that he winds up not going with anywhere close to his best 11, whether it was Alvaro Garcia we saw come off the bench, the right back, the Peruvian right back in Advincula. He winds up not, even Mateus Suarez, who hasn't really been the starter this year, but still you'd say he's probably their most experienced player. So other than Trejo and Fran Garcia has been the left back this season, it really wasn't the best version of Rayo Vallecano that we could have seen. Did you understand when you saw that starting 11 what the idea was for Areola and how that's different from what he normally throws out in the second division?
Not really, no, because what Iraola has done, and we saw him, he was actually the manager of Mirandés last year, and we saw Mirandés' unbelievable cup run there. They got to the semi-final, and he and it's a natural progression for him. Mirandés, kind of a smaller club, Rayo, kind of a yo, no, not kind of, they are absolutely a yo-yo club, up and down, maybe belong at the top end of the Segunda, but also feel entirely comfortable and have been at times throughout the last decade. In La Liga, they spent a lot of time there, so kind of like a 1A Segunda team. And he has brought so Rayo are absolutely a basket case of a club. And then tactically, Rayo, and this is another reason why I love them, is because you go to the Vallecas Stadium and they had obviously Paco Gémez in charge. But then Michel, they have a philosophy of playing beautiful football, and which can lead all of course to incredible performances, but also they can lead to crazy results like 4-3s. We went to see Barcelona playing Rayo in La Liga a couple of years ago, and Rayo were leading up until kind of late on that game or into the second half. And Barcelona came back, so allowing Messi to keep his record intact. But so what Iraola has done is he's come in and kind of solidified them, and there's not as many crazy results. There's a lot of 1-0s, a lot of 1-alls, a lot of kind of 2-0s, way more stable, which kind of goes against Rayo's style. But then last night they came out and they played a kind of high pressing game. There was high intensity, and it was kind of like, it felt like Iraola was saying, look, we've got nothing to lose here. And it felt like they were definitely kind of, their goal is to get back into La Liga. So, I mean, they were going out with nothing to lose last night. And I think we saw that. They took the lead against Barcelona in the second half and could have won that game if it wasn't for, obviously Messi and De Jong. But, yeah, I wasn't sure what to expect. But then when I saw how they played and how intense they were and their high pressing, I felt like, yeah, they're going out here with their boots on. They've got nothing to lose, with the goal in mind that promotion from the second division is their goal.
Well, yeah, at the moment, as you mentioned, promotion is the goal, not necessarily going after the Copa del Rey trophy. They're currently in fourth place, so that means they're in one of the 4 playoff spots in the Segunda Division A. The top 2, that being Espanyol and Mallorca, the favorites right now to get automatic promotion, but still plenty to play. But there's Almeria, Rayo Vallecano, Sporting Gijón. You want to talk about Yo-Yo, and then Leganés as well, who just got sent down. So those are your 4 teams right now in the playoff spot. So we will keep one eye on what Rayo Vallecano are doing in the Segunda Division table. But Robbie, we also want to keep one eye on what you're working on and what you're doing currently. So can you give people just a quick update on where they can find you again? I will have your Twitter bio so people can click on your name down in the description to find you on Twitter. But what are you working on at the moment?
Yeah, just working from home. Still working with Ask English. We've been doing the work from home since February, whenever the first lockdown started. So yeah, it gives me the chance to kind of get back and forth to Ireland a little bit. And we're in Spain here. So I'm in Spain at the moment, in Madrid at home. And we've got the coronavirus. I don't know if you kind of like talking about that on the podcast, but yeah, we've got the coronavirus situation here. We don't know what's going on. It's worse than it was in March, and yet we're not really in lockdown. So it's a really, really strange time to be a football journalist and a football fan at the moment. We can't go to games. Definitely a strange one, but just kind of trying to keep it together as best I can.
Yeah, for sure. As we mentioned with Rayo Vallecano, one of the terms that I see that it's a heavy metal neighborhood is what I've read about Rayo Vallecano and the neighborhood around the stadium, and certainly you can't do heavy metal without any fans at all. So yeah, that is certainly a big part of the culture and the understanding of a club like that. And you're living the same life, and we all are too indoors. Well, Robbie, unfortunately, that's where we ended on a sour note. I mean, Francesca and I, we joke that we always try to end with a negative in that way, but the positive is that you were joining me today, and I really appreciate your time as well.
That's no problem at all. Any time I can help out, give me a shout.
So again, this was Robbie Dunne, and I want to thank you, the listeners, for tuning in to our second show of the week. You can check out the show notes to subscribe and follow Robbie on Twitter there down in the description below. We're on social media too, at the Barcelona Pod on Twitter, at HiltonD13 for me, on Instagram at the Barcelona Pod, closed Facebook group, tvpod.link/group, deeper dives and discussions. And I asked on Monday's show for people to help us out on Patreon, and we got 3 new patrons that I want to mention as well. Special thank you to them for joining. I'll say their name the next time we do that, a few weeks' time or a month's time. But thank you so much for those who have joined Patreon and for the rewards over there. That's tvpod.link/Patreon. We're also on YouTube, as everybody knows, at the Barcelona Podcast. So check us out there. Hit that subscription button. But most importantly, thanks so much for listening to the Barcelona Podcast. Until next time, we'll talk to you soon. And Forza Barca.